Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking into some pretty concerning reports about the deportation of U.S. citizen children under President Trump's immigration policies.
Yeah, it's a difficult topic. We're drawing mainly from an NBC News report, which details these specific deportations and, importantly, the legal claims that followed.
Right. So our aim here is to, understand the core claims, what the administration said in response, and maybe unpack some of the really tough legal and ethical questions that come up.
And what jumps out immediately is just how different the stories are. You've got attorneys for the family saying, look, the deportation of 3 American kids, all under 10, that was flat out unlawful.
Unlawful. Okay. And they're specifically pointing fingers, right? Arguing the Trump administration, maybe Tom Homan specifically, didn't quite represent things accurately.
That's the claim. Holman apparently suggested the kids were deported because their mothers asked for it. And Senator Rubio also mentioned they went with their mothers and, crucially, could return.
Okay, went with their mothers, could return. But the lawyers, they paint a very, very different picture, don't they?
Completely different. Their argument is that these families, well, they weren't really offered any kind of genuine choice. The report claims IC actually obstructed efforts to find other care.
Obstructed. So stopping them from finding, say, relatives or guardians here in the U.S. for these citizen kids.
Essentially, yes,
Yeah.
making it almost inevitable that the children would be deported with their parents, regardless of their U.S. citizenship.
Wow. And the specific cases mentioned in the report they're quite harrowing.
They really are. There's one instance where a mother apparently had less than 2 minutes on the phone with her husband to decide what happens to their 2-year-old American son.
Less than 2 minutes. That's
I
hardly a
think,
choice. And then there was the other case, the child with cancer.
yeah, that one is particularly distressing. A mother deported with her U.S.-born child who has stage 4 cancer.
Stage 4 cancer.
And the lawyers allege this happened even though IC knew about the child's condition, and the mother wasn't allowed to talk to lawyers or family first.
Yeah.
It's just...
It really highlights the conflict between the official statements and these deeply personal, tragic situations.
And it connects to a kind of broader critique you heard at the time about the administration's deportation tactics. Some argued they were maybe designed to, let's say, sidestep usual legal checks and balances.
Like trying to move quickly before courts could intervene?
That's the implication in some commentary. And it wasn't just these children. NBC also brought up the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case.
Remind us about that one.
He was a Maryland man deported to El Salvador. This was despite having a protective order here in the U.S. A legal order meant to keep him safe.
Right. And there were court orders about his return.
Courts told the administration to facilitate his return. But the government's stance was, essentially, we can't force another country to send someone back.
So again, this pattern of citing limitations when pushed to reverse a deportation, even with court involvement.
Exactly. Which brings us squarely back to the rights of these U.S. citizen kids. What are their rights when their parents face deportation? Are those rights being prioritized or even considered?
Yeah, what does U.S. citizenship mean for a child if the government itself is involved in removing them from the country? It's a fundamental question.
And the ethics, particularly with the child suffering from stage 4 cancer, it's hard to fathom. If the lawyer's account is accurate, that attempts to find alternatives were actively blocked. Well, it raises serious ethical flags.
For sure. So thinking bigger picture now, how did these specific, very human stories fit into the wider context of Trump's immigration policies and maybe the public reaction at the time?
Well, the report suggests there was growing unease among voters about some of these hardline tactics. And cases like these, involving vulnerable American children, likely fueled that concern. It puts a human face on complex policy debates.
It definitely does. It highlights this core tension, doesn't it? Balancing immigration enforcement with protecting the rights of your own citizens, especially kids.
That's the crux of it. You have the administration's account, children left willingly, they can come back, versus the lawyer's account, no real choice. Obstacles were put in place. They're just fundamentally different stories.
So wrapping up then, we've got these clashing narratives about why these U.S. citizen children were deported. Legal challenges were underway, trying to sort out the facts and the legality.
Right. And it leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty heavy thought. What are the long-term effects on these families, and maybe even on how we define citizenship when things like this happen?
How does a country strike that balance between enforcing its laws and upholding the fundamental rights of its citizens, particularly children caught in these incredibly tough spots? Something to think about.